Welcome for today's session of the FJelinekSeries of lectures. Today we are very lucky, so to say, because we have a prominent guest for the series, Professor Martin Kay. I don't think it's necessary to introduce him in more detail, just saying that he's professor of Stanford University and the professor of the University of the Saarlands. He is one of the most prominent, not the most prominent specialist in computation linguistics. That should have been present perfect, I think. So he has been for many, many years. And I'm really very happy that he could accept our invitation and come here. And I'm very much interested in what he was saying to us, because as you all know, Fred Jelinek stood on one side of the computational linguistics present-day approaches, and I have had the feeling that Martin is on the other side. But nevertheless, he has accepted our invitation, so the more curious I am what he is supposed to tell us. So please take the floor.
You're telling me I can't get away now. Okay. Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's a particular pleasure and something of a challenge to come to speak in a series of lectures that is named for Fred Jelinek, because there is indeed a sense in which we stood on opposite sides of something. But as I thought about it, I think he would have been very supportive of some of the things I'm going to say. Because although his main contributions were in one area, his view of the field was immensely large. And I have talked at Johns Hopkins, and I have spent quite a lot of time talking to him. And so I think you will find that some of the things I will say sound a little bit extreme. Usually when I say them, the next slide will take back a little bit of what I just said. If you happen to be strongly on Fred Jelinek's side, just wait until the next slide, and maybe we'll be able to even it out. I don't know whether this will work for me or not. Maybe not. Okay. It doesn't matter. You have to plug this in. Oh, well. That makes all the difference.
I saw your slides like 5 minutes before this, but now they don't appear. I don't know why. This is awesome.
Well, oh dear. Let's not trust fate anymore. We'll go with what we have. Okay. So we're talking about machine translation, and the reason for this title is as follows. I am going to go along with the belief that there is a lot of information in raw data, in translations themselves, actual examples of translations, that will tell you how translations are done. We can look at the old ones and find out something about how to do a new one. And we've seen enough of things like Google Translate and so forth to know that this is certainly true. There's an enormous amount, far more than we were able to do before. What I'm going to claim is that in order to do high-quality machine translation, you cannot simply produce better algorithms, better mathematics, more statistics, and hope that you will be able to reach those situations where you are doing high-quality work, because the information you want is not in that data. It doesn't matter how hard you try, it isn't there. It has to come from somewhere else. So, as my mother would say, you can't get blood from a stone. Just as background, I like to think of machine translation as covering a multidimensional field, but it's hard to show multidimensional fields, so let's just stick with 2 dimensions for the moment. I take it that a piece of text can be more or less difficult with regard to the challenges it presents to a translator. There's easy stuff and there's hard stuff and lots of stuff in between. And on a completely different dimension, there is the question of how good a result you want to have. How important is it to you that this translation should be of a high quality, whatever that means. When things are up at this end of the scale, when you want really high quality, we are often thinking about what is called dissemination. That is to say, the person who wants the translation is the person who is producing it. I'm sorry, exactly the reverse. The person who is going to read the translation is not the person who is calling for it. It is the person that produced the original text that is calling for it, because they want to disseminate this word to the masses. They want lots of people to read it. They want those people not only to understand it, but to understand it well, and more particularly to think well of them for producing a good translation, as well as presumably a good product, or whatever it might be. So the translation, the quality of the translation, really matters to them. We also say that such translations are informative. They're supposed to actually tell you lots of details about whatever the subject matter of the text is. On this end, you, the reader, are calling for the translation. Somebody put out a piece of text, maybe they just send you a message or something like that. You don't understand it, it's in another language. You call for a translation. It doesn't have to be particularly good, just good enough so that you can squeeze out this particular piece of information that you're interested in. We often call that indicative translation. It's quite clear, I guess, that lots of things occupy different places in here. Poetry and plays and novels and so on are up in that corner because the language is part of what it's all about. It's not just the story, it's the language itself. Advertising is up there too. You have to get advertising just exactly right. Otherwise, often exactly the wrong message will be gotten from it. So it matters a lot. Weather reports, on the other hand, are pretty easy to do, so easy to do, in fact, that you can get high quality without having to work very hard at it at all. It's almost a closed language. Almost everything you say has been said before, and we just have to remember what it was so that we can say it again. Manuals for washing machines or cars or whatever it might be are sort of intermediate on both dimensions. They're not as easy as you might think they were. There are subtleties and questions of pronominal reference and stuff like that. They're in the middle somewhere. Scientific papers are really difficult for the very simple reason, so simple it sounds silly, because they're about something new. That's what scientific papers are all about. They often define their own terms in italics, right? There's something being said that hasn't been said before, one hopes. That's what makes them difficult to translate. There's been a curious interest in translating things from Arabic recently. Wasn't quite sure why this was, but it apparently has something to do with home security. But the biggest people in the block are, of course, Google, who every time you see something in a language that isn't yours, provide you with a button that says, translate this page. And, well, you can translate it at your peril. So there's a lot involved all over here with searching for things in a language which is not yours. Now, let me point out to you that this is where all the hype is. All the talk is about this. about the kind of thing you can get from Google, about assimilation, indicative translation. This is not the translation that the world cares about. What the world cares about is stuff that people can send out from their companies so that you will buy their product. A translation of our newspaper so that people in other countries will read it, and so forth. It is high-quality translation. The demand for high-quality translation is absolutely enormous. So, my thesis is that the world's appetite for translation is growing at a great rate. Ask anybody in the EU whether that's true or not. That most of it needs to be of a quality at or close to that expected of professional translators. It must be good. You must be able to trust it. You should not be able to tell easily that it is a translation at all. And it will require, in order to do it, it requires of a human translator knowledge of the language, of course. It will require some statistics, knowing what is probable in this field, even if you don't know absolutely what is the particular situation in one particular case or another. Any translator all the time is making probabilistic estimates of things. And it requires a knowledge of the world in general and of people in particular. So there's a lot that you have to know that is nothing to do with translation specifically, nothing to do with linguistics specifically, nothing to do with translation specifically. A translator has to know a lot of these things. I claim that in the long run to this high-quality translation, the contribution of machine learning will be minimal. It will be important. We will need all we have now got and some more also. But relative to the other things that we need to know, it will be minimal. Now there is a perception out there, especially amongst the people who advocate a purely statistical approach, that linguistics has somehow failed technology. It has let us down. Linguistics, people will say, is not about communication. It's about irregular verbs and Dontkey sentences and curiosities and oddities and little things that people are claimed to say but never quite do and stuff like that. It focuses, in other words, on fringe phenomena, just occasional things. I have been interrupted in the middle of a talk once when I mentioned a Dontkey sentence by somebody who just simply stood up and walked out. It had enough Dontkey sentences for a lifetime. It is not robust. The kinds of systems that linguists build, however clever they may be and however important the theories behind them may be, the point is they break all the time. And that's simply not acceptable in the real world. Linguistics luxuriates in ambiguities but is not interested in resolving them. There's nothing a linguist likes more than to discover a new kind of ambiguity that nobody had noticed before. And finally, linguistics never gets beyond the sentence. Now, I shouldn't put this up in Prague, should I? If there's any place in the world where linguistics really does go beyond the sentence, it's here. But generally speaking, the perception is that it doesn't go beyond the sentence nearly as much as it should. The perception is therefore that statistics will replace linguistics in serious matters like machine translation. It is more objective and therefore more scientific. I'm not sure about the therefore there, but anyway, it's objective. It's the only thing that can handle the amount of data that we need to deal with. People simply cannot go through all the data, just look at the amount of stuff that the designers of statistical machine translation go through in order to build their systems, would be unthinkable if it had to be done by human beings. It makes for rapid development. The way you build a statistical machine translation system is you tweak various things on the last one that you build, so that all the preparations are ready for the next one on Friday evening, and then you go away for the weekend and you come back on Monday morning and you have a brand new machine translation system that's been built over the weekend. It's a very, very efficient thing to do. We can't do that with the kinds of things that linguists provide. I'm going to claim that in many ways linguistics has been a phenomenal success, but it needs to be understood appropriately. Where problems have competing solutions, fringe phenomena can decide the issue. The reason why there are Dontkey sentences and things like that is because they encapsulate something which is important and hard to encapsulate in just one place where you see that problem and nothing else. And if you can handle it in this one case, we will be able to handle an important thing in lots and lots of other cases, and that's the way linguists proceed, and that works to a large extent. Here's an important point that I can't stress too much. Ambiguity is one of the most important, desirable, necessary properties of language. Without it, we couldn't get on. Notice that for all the problems that it presents to us, language is something that we use in a totally casual way. We just throw it around without thinking about it. When we use language, we're always thinking about something else. We're never thinking about it. And so, hardly surprisingly, we have to be allowed to do things in such a way that we might make the occasional error, but it's fixed up in such a way that magically, although we make the occasional error, the error is usually not even noticed. The system is on our side. And that's without that, language simply would never have got off the ground. It is very, very important that it should have this kind of robustness. And it's true that linguists, for the most part, have stayed within the sentence. And it's true there's a lot to be seen outside, but my goodness, there's a lot of work to be done within the realms of a sentence, and notice that the statisticians are still in there. They haven't left it either, for the most part. Okay, so, linguists, it seems to me, can take on that part of the problem that is properly theirs, and there are other things which perhaps should be taken on by other people, and my goodness, I have a lot of other people in mind. Statisticians, yes, but other people also. The statistician's insight, it seems to me, is that the mistake of computational linguists has been to try to understand their subject. If you're a statistician, you don't try to understand language, you just try to get the answer. Never mind about nouns and verbs and subordinate clauses and long-distance dependence. It's got to get the job done. There's a job to be done here. Let's get on with it. And that attitude, it sounds a little bit funny, and I'm parodying it, of course, but it has worked for this period. It has brought the bacon home. It has really done something important. In the long run, if we really care about the quality of the product, I claim that machine learning will prove to be a phenomenal failure. We will continue to use what we get from it, and we will do more stuff, and it will be important, and I'm not trying to say that isn't the case. But it will be a very small part of our field if and when we actually wind up doing high-quality things of the kind that I think the world is expecting of us. There will be certain places where its role will be crucial. We really do need to know what the probabilities of a lot of things are, and we need to be able to treat them appropriately. And in the very long run, it may be that we will have access to an altogether different kind of data than the kind that we're working on now. The data which does not simply consist of examples of previous translations or some text that somebody has annotated or something. Perhaps we will get data about the way the brain works from scans of one kind or another, things I can't even imagine now, that will change the equation as far as statistics goes. I don't know about those things, but I think it entirely possible that these things will happen. But the information that we need to do a good job is not available now, and it is, I think, going to be quite a while before it is. Sooner or later, I'm going to say something that's not only banal, but absolutely totally obvious, and this is the moment. Translation is about transferring meaning from one text to another. Of course, the question is, so what is this meaning stuff all about? What does it mean? Some of the greatest minds in the world have worked on this, most recently, for example, the question, it depends on what the meaning of is. This was a very important question, addressed by one of the most important people. Meaning, I think, covers a huge amount of stuff. The way I'm using the meaning, the word meaning, the way sort of people do in everyday life. They use it in all sorts of different ways. It refers to the situation in which something is said and the situation that it is talking about. That's part of the meaning of a sentence. A sentence is usually talking about something, and that something that it's talking about is somehow involved in its meaning. It's certainly concerned with a related thing, which is the reference. What are the particular things that are being talked about? Who is this person, Jack, who's been named here? Where is he? Where is he now? What happened to him in the next paragraph? Where was he before the first paragraph? It's, of course, concerned with grammar. And it's, of course, concerned with the lexicon. When you talk about the meaning, I suppose people think first and foremost of a dictionary or a lexicon, which tells you in standard terminology what the meanings of the words are. Well, let me concentrate just for a moment on situation and reference. What I'm going to say is going to be some very, very obvious and banal things, but they just deserve, I think, to be reflected on for a moment or two. So, situation and reference. There is a situation that I have in mind. I have a sort of mental stage on which things are playing out. And what I'm going to do is to talk to you and hope that you will construct on your stage in your mind the same little scenario that's going on in mine. That's a lot of what happens in language. So we have hopefully up until now arrived at a situation where we're sharing some particular view of what we're talking about. And then somebody says something, and after that, the situation is no longer what it was before. We now have a situation in which this person that we were both talking about is no longer standing up, but is sitting down. So what language has done is enable me to take this, and if I'm successful, to take this picture in your head. This is me. I take this picture, which I assume is in your head, and I change it from that one into that one. So, a term, update semantics, has occasionally been used for this sort of thing. What each utterance does is to take the picture and update it in some way, to produce a modification of it. So, quite often the initial picture is a very blurred one, but it comes along with a lot of suppositions. Suppose that the dateline, the heading of a newspaper piece, says Damascus. Well, I already have a lot of ideas in mind as to what might be going on. Just might be rather violent. I have even the names in mind of some of the people that might be involved in this story. But if it says Athens, I'll have a different set of people in mind. Still a vague picture, but a different picture. If it says Davos, I won't have in mind very much many of the same rather dramatic things as I might have in Damascus. I expect this to be a more gentlemanly scene. If it says Hollywood, well, I have to be more open about the way things are going to go. But in any case, I'm going to start with something some very minimal picture that I build up here, and then the language is going to modify it and move from state to state, stage to stage, so that the language is filling the role of a situation updater. So one of the things that you have to be able to do is to keep track of the things that I'm talking about. Seems obvious, doesn't it? The things, not the words, the things that are being talked about. This guy here, you've got to be able to figure out that after I say he sat down, you've now got this which is different from that, but this is the same guy as that guy. You've got to be able to keep track of those different people. Otherwise, the whole thing will be without purpose. So you've got to be able to keep track of things. That's about reference, as I said before. Now, the thing about things, the point about things is that there are an awful lot of them. So, suppose that somebody says, she took his wallet. Okay, so I don't have my little scene here, but we have a scene of somebody taking somebody's wallet. I've got that stage there. And now I can say, I saw it in her hand. Well, whenever you have this word it around, it can be doing various things, but one of the things it's often doing is referring to a thing. It's a very, very general word for referring to things. What did I see in her hand? Only one candidate here, his wallet. So it refers to, is talking about the wallet, and therefore you know what it was that she is alleged to have had in her hand. But suppose that the next thing says, I saw her do it. And this is presumably not the wallet anymore. This is presumably the action. I saw this action that she carried out. I may not have seen the wallet at all. That her hand may have prevented me from actually seeing it, but I saw her do whatever it is that she did. I claim that I do. I say I could not believe it. That is not her taking of the wallet, and it's not the wallet. It's the fact, the abstract fact that she took the wallet. So I can talk about that as well. Then we've got other things like this. A spider is not an insect. It's an arachnid. Well, what is it referring to here? Which particular spider do we have in mind? There are no spiders around here, as I was saying. What is the spider that we have in mind? It is the canonical, the single spider that we call upon to represent all spiders when we want to say something like this. It's the generic spider. John does not believe that the morning star is the evening star because it looks different to him. What does it refer to here? Well, I claim that it refers to whatever the morning star refers to, in some sense, and we have to leave open the question of whether that is the same thing as what this refers to. No, that's not quite good enough, is it? You see, John sees two things. He sees something in the evening and something in the morning, and those two things that he sees, those two images, look different to him. The first one looks different from the second one. We are not discussing here whether they both are talking about Venus. we're talking about two images. We create things all the time. There aren't enough things for us in the world, so we create more of them. A rhinoceros has a single horn, and so does a unicorn. How many things do we have here? One per rhinoceros and one per unicorn. That's quite a lot for the rhinoceros and not very many for the unicorns. It may be that a rhinoceros is generic here and that the generic rhinoceros has only a single horn, so that's only one thing. But since it's generic, the unicorn presumably has also one horn, even though it doesn't exist. All right? Existence is no particular reason to get entry into this club or not. You don't have to exist. This is a view of the world which Jerry Hobbs refers to as ontological promiscuity. Basically, there are a lot of things, more things than you would ever give credit to. Jerry Hobbs thought this was the right way to think of things. Quine did not. He thought it was a bad way to think of things, so he called it the bloated universe. Now, one of the things that occurs all the time is that there is, of course, ambiguity of reference, just as there is ambiguity of lots of other things. So if I say the number on the last page of the book indicates what part of the collection it belongs to, well, what does it refer to in this case? It could be lots of these noun phrases, as we've seen, lots of different ways that noun phrases can refer to things. It matters if we're going to translate into a language like, well, I'll take French, but I'll bet Czech would have done just as well. It could have been le numéro, in which case it had better be masculine. It could have been la page, in which case it had better be feminine. It could have been le livre, in which case it had better be masculine again, and so forth. Whoops. There's a way of doing this without going back through them all. And one day I'll learn what it is. You know whether to use one of these pronouns because you know something of what it is to be on a page and for a page to be in a book. You know about those things, and therefore you can make inferences based on what you know about these things, which will help you to figure out which of these things it might be. You're going to be concerned, generally speaking, with the ones that is most plausible. A little bit of probability coming in there. Broadly speaking, noun phrases are used either to introduce new objects or to refer to previously introduced objects. So with it here, I'm using it to refer back to something that has been referred to before. Sometimes I use it to create a new object in your mind, on my stage and your stage, I hope. Sometimes I'm simply referring to something that's already there. You can also use it to add information about existing objects. So notice that the demands that it puts upon you to refer to something that has not been referred to before are much greater than if it's been referred to before. Notice that if I want to refer to something that's on the stage, all I have to do is to distinguish it from the other things on the stage. So I can be much more casual about the way that I do that. But if I'm bringing something new onto the stage, then I have to be clear to give it enough properties so that when I do want to refer to it later, I can do so successfully. It's a different kind of enterprise that I'm engaged in. So look at this. I talked to the chair of the department for about half an hour, and then they took me to meet the dean. And after that, I go on, and it says, the dean was a much younger man than I expected. Or he was a much younger man than I expected. I knew what to do with he because There may be some other males on the stage, but he is the salient one. He's the one that was just put there. So the default idea is that if he just came on the stage, he's probably interesting, and therefore a word like he probably refers to him. If there's any chance in confusion, I can stop somewhere between the very specific one and the least specific one, and I can say this man or that person. Can't say these if I'm introducing somebody you've never heard of before. You know what to do with something like the dean. If I say, they took me to see the dean, I have to have some way of knowing. You can't say they took me, after I talked to the chair of the department for about half an hour, and then they took me to meet him. That won't do. You have to, because he's being brought onto the stage, you have to refer to him in a different way. Think of the following. I'm engaged in one of these crazy psychological experiments that they pay undergraduates €5 a session to carry out, and they have thousands of them. And here's this poor undergraduate, doesn't know what's going on, but he's told, he'll do anything he's told for $5. Pick up a yellow token from the pile beside the box, okay? Put it in the box. Okay, there are two things I put it to you that it could be referring to. Well, there are probably more. There's the pile of tokens. There's the token you just picked up. And there's the box. You're probably unlikely, even an undergraduate at $5 an hour won't try to put the box in the box. All right? Might just think of putting the pile in the box, but somehow or other there's something that militates against that. There is something that makes you really want to put this yellow token in the box. What is that? That is that if somebody tells you to pick something up, here you are, you have it in your hand. You've got this damn thing in your hand. They'd better tell you what to do with it. That's own decency. You must tell me what to do with it. So, given any choice at all, I will interpret what you say next as to what I ought to do to get rid of this token. And thank you, you did it. So I know what to do with it. Now, there's an important approach to all this that was put forward by somebody that people in this audience may have run across, who pointed out that languages differ essentially, not in what they differ essentially in what they must convey and not in what they may convey. Language, you can use any language to describe pretty much any of these events, but once you get into it, the language that you are operating in will require you to provide certain information that another language might not. Okay, so let's look at some examples from grammar, for example. In Finnish, you can say this, if you speak Finnish. And what it means is either he goes or she goes. Because Finnish has pronouns that do not commit themselves as to whether they're talking about males or females. So if you are translating from Finnish into, say, English, you have to supply information that is not there in the original and comes from what's on the stage. There's nowhere else to get it from. The language won't provide it to you. You must get it from the scene that you are looking at. Il a été accepté par le plus grand nombre de chercheurs. Either it or he has been accepted by the majority of researchers. Presumably, you'll choose it for probably statistical reasons in this case, but it could be that most people have accepted him despite the fact that he's alleged to have cheated on, whatever it is. So, given the situation, it could be it or he, but you must choose. There's no commitment here. There's a necessary commitment there. You can't get away without supplying this information, and it's real information about the situation. It is not information that the language supplies. It's information that the language demands. Whereas, if we take this, we put it in here, and we translate back into French again, it has been accepted by, and so forth. It could be either il or elle, and how do we know? Well, we've got to know what is being referred to, and then we use that information to know how it was referred to, whether by a masculine or a feminine noun before. So it's a two-stage operation. We must first find the referent, and we must second find the word that is most salient as a way of referring to that referent. I think I could go on. I think I'll skip over a few of these because they're all making basically the same point. This is a nice one, by the way. I was happy to meet your charming daughter. J'étais heureux de faire la connaissance de votre fille charmante et votre charmante fille. We were taught in school that French adjectives are marked in the lexicon as either preceding the noun or following the noun. That's sort of true, except that if they're marked as following the noun, they can also precede the noun. Apart from that difference, it was perfectly correct. They precede the noun if they are providing some new information in a certain way. So, if I want to say, I was happy to meet your daughter, who, by the way, was charming, then I say, votre fille charmante. Yes. But if I want to say, I was happy to meet your daughter, and by the... That's what I just said. I want to say, I was happy to meet your daughter, and furthermore, I want to tell you that she was charming. Two things. Then I say, votre charmante fille. If I say, I was happy to meet your charming daughter, and it's understood that somehow you have two daughters, and one of them is charming, and well, the less we say about the other one, the better, then I put it afterwards, okay? So, I was happy to meet votre fille charmante, and please don't introduce me to the other one again. Look, reference, very important, this reference thing. Suppose we are at a party, and over there, long way from us, there are these two people. Okay? And we're talking French, of course, because we want to look sophisticated. So, you say to me, est-ce que c'est ta cousine? And I say, non, je n'ai pas de cousine. So this means, is that your cousin, where this happens to be the feminine version of cousin? And I say, no, I do not have a cousin, feminine of cousin. All right? So in English, is that your cousin? Maybe, no, I don't have a cousin, but hang on a minute, maybe I do. But maybe the cousin I have isn't feminine, maybe it's masculine. In which case I can still say this, that, but I can't say that anymore. Okay? Now I might try to get around it. Being a linguist, I could do all sorts of absurd things. So I could say, is that your female cousin? And you could say, no, I don't have a female cousin. Not only does that sound silly, but it actually gives the wrong answer. Because in English, if you say, I don't have a female cousin, it implies that you do have a male cousin. And that's not what's going on here. There is a way to get around this, and here's a really important point. The way translators get around these things is by being really inventive and producing a translation where you can't simply translate this word by that word and this word by that word and so forth, where you take the thing back onto the stage and you re-describe what is on the stage without any concern for the particular words that were used before. How do you do it in this case? Simple. Is that woman your cousin? Okay? Quite different from the original. It doesn't always win. You have to actually know what's on the stage, because of course if this is the picture, then we can't say, is that woman your cousin? We have to say, is that girl your cousin? I leave it to this ingenious people in one of the capitals of the linguistic world. I leave it to you, all of whom know a good deal of English as well as many other languages, to figure out how you translate "Non, je n'ai pas de cousine," or equivalent in German, "Nein, ich habe keine Cousine," into English. I do not know how to do it. I do not know how to do that in English. A little bit of the lexicon. A simple but quite productive view of the meanings of ordinary everyday words, and we'll leave it aside for the moment what I really mean by that, is that there is, so to speak, a grid which is laid down on the world. There are lots of things in this grid, so far more things than there are in the physical universe, a much bigger world than that. And there's a grid you lay down on it, and everything that's in here you can call a school, and everything that's in here you can call a college. And you can see immediately there's something wrong with this. These two have to overlap with one another because there are lots of things that are both schools and colleges. And there's a subset of these which are not only schools, they're high schools. And then there's a set of things which are another subset that are prep schools. Then there are different ways that actually people lay this grid down within the same languages and of course across different languages. So a prep school may be everything in here in US English, but it's everything in here in United Kingdom English. A prep school in United Kingdom means something totally different from what it means in the United States. And for a small fee, I'll tell you afterwards what that is. So what's going on here is that the situation demands different senses, but it also supplies different senses. There are different ways that I can use these words, not simply because of what the dictionary says about them, but because what the current situation that's on stage invites me to believe about them. So there's an interchange between these two things. The sense selects reference from the situation, and the situation selects suitable senses. As the text proceeds, new situations and new senses are created. Some of them you never expect. So something that happens between my wife and I all the time involves this word. I'll invent a context for it. Seville oranges are quite bitter, but they are good for making the kind of jam the British like to have with their breakfast. This is perfectly understandable to any American and is very confusing to anybody from Britain. Because what you make with Seville oranges is called marmalade, and although marmalade you'd think was a kind of jam, I'm sorry, it is not. Either it's marmalade or it's jam. Marmalade is not jam. Not in Britain, anyway. And that's where the language comes from, after all, right? So there are lots of subtle differences. One I'll come across in a minute distinguishes halten from enden in German. They're both translations of the English word stop. Something stops. You can say haltet or endet. In order to choose between them, you have to know what the difference in the situation is, and you have to do it. You can't just say, well, just use a generic word for stop, because there isn't one in German. You have to supply this extra information. There's a difference between a professor and a teacher. In English, It's a little bit harder to make in French, where professeur operates on and many of them teach in lycée, and they're also called professors and so on. So whenever you run across the word, I'm using the German word here, but whenever you use the French word professeur, you have to decide which it is, and do I need to make it clear, or don't I? There's a judgment that I have to make. Very famous difference between wissen and kennen, savoir and connaître, are often believed to be the same in these two languages, but actually not quite the same. You can actually say in German, wissen Sie eine kleine Kneipe in diesem Gegend, or something or other. Do you know a little place where you can have a drink around here? You can actually use wissen for that, but you can't use savoir in French. Just exactly how you get away with it, I'm not sure. And you're absolutely forced in German, if you want to say go, you're absolutely forced to say gehen if it's walking, fahren if it's something with wheels, and even fliegen if it's by plane, and something else if it's by boat, and so on. You have to make these distinctions, you have to put them in there, or you have to be very ingenious. As I pointed out, sometimes you have to be ingenious. Suppose that somebody says in French, here I am, I come into the room, and there's a lot of going on around here, and I come to this meeting, and I say to the person, où voulez-vous que je me mette? It means quite literally, where do you want that I put myself? Where do you want me to put myself? Okay? That's pretty lousy English, believe me. So what do? Well, you look at the situation and you decide what you know is really going on. And you say, where do you want me to sit? Or, if we're all standing, where do you want me to stand? But it could be, where do you want me to sign? Where do you want me to put my name? Where do you want me to tie up my boat? If we're all got boats here, then where do I tie? Où voulez-vous que je me mette? Perfectly good way of doing that. Where do you want me to tie up my horse? What's the ingenious way around this? Where do you want me? You can do this in English, but you can't do it by picking words out of here and translating the words, or by picking phrases out of here and translating the phrases. To get from there to there, you have to go back on the stage, out of language into the world, and then back from the world into language in order to get this ingenious translation. Can I use a little bit more time? I'll try not to use too much. Let's decide whether we're going to do this next bit or not. Give me a moment. Let's go to here. The dictionary gives us some guidance on this sort of thing. It tells us something about the scope of various of these words, the possible things that they might refer to. But no dictionary actually draws all the lines that need to be drawn or that could be drawn. And they're always drawn in different places by different languages or even different dialects. So look at a few of this word school. Several schools were badly damaged by the tornado. What does that mean? The children are no longer good at mathematics in those schools? No. It means that the buildings were good. Maybe the children were away on vacation, the buildings were damaged. Many think that American children should spend more time in school. What does that mean? In the building? Probably they should spend a lot more time in the school building because that's where a lot of schooling gets done, but not necessarily. You can run a school in the local church, or you can run it in your front room for that matter. That's still going to school. Sally and Joey went to the game to root for their school. That's good American English, to root for something. To root for what? It means to support them in the game. To root for their school. Is that the building? No. Is that the other place where you might hold the classes? No. That is the school viewed as a collectivity of people, as sort of a team, more or less, who stand by one another and support one another. In some parts of the world, it's not uncommon for children to leave school before the age of 13. They leave school every day. They go home at the end of the day, they leave school. I mean, this could have said, in some parts of the world, it's not uncommon for children to leave school before 3 o'clock. That would have meant something entirely different, and could have required an altogether different word in this language from school. Hillary thinks a school in Germany is much harder than the one in Uzbekistan. Now, you can really knock on this. This is a real school. This is hard stuff, none of this gooey, you know? After the game, the whole school gathered to celebrate the victory. Obviously, this is the members of the community that are associated with that school. The school is considering changes in the code on academic honesty. That the school there may mean all the people. It's actually likely to mean the teachers and the head of the school, maybe more than the other people in the school. So it means a different part of the community, not the same one. This is one I like. Rachel is being homeschooled. She goes to school at home. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to say in English. She goes to school at home. She doesn't go to school at school. Right? Going to school in this case means doing what children do when they're in school. That's going to school. It's a perfectly good way of saying to it. All I want to say is that some of these things may go over in the other language. Others may not. It's a matter of convention which of these things you can get away with. There are lots of things in an individual culture which you can't expect to find a translation of, and you are going to have to use these ingenious tricks to get around them. 2 no trumps, a shortstop, a goalkeeper, an end run, these are all things that come up in various sports. But not only that, but they're sports that tend to be very, very limited to the parts of the world where they're played. Happy hour is now spreading through Europe like wildfire, but it used to exist only in the United States. It's a time when the drinks cost less. Alimony is the money that a divorced man pays to his former wife for the upkeep of the children. Now, if you come from Papua New Guinea, you think you have a word for that? I doubt it. You'd have to invent something. Value-added tax, a homeowner's policy, very special kind of insurance policy. I don't know whether there's a name for that in places other than the United States. It's a very comprehensive policy, covers lots of things. In America, you can ask for hot tea and nobody will laugh. In Britain, if you ask for hot tea, people will look at you in a very strange way. Do you know what the Italian for espresso is? Well, it's caffè. And what is the Italian for coffee? Well, anyway, the Italian for espresso is caffè. Okay. In French, if you want an Italian espresso, you want that really thick, you know, that really, really good stuff that they make in Italy. You can get it in France now. You ask for a café serré. If you're in Germany, wait a while. They'll come up with a word for it. Right now, you can't get it. I wanted one very much one night. I really felt like this. I was at a restaurant and I said, can you give me ein Kaffee italienischer Art, in the Italian style? And he brought me a tray with a coffee and a grappa. And so on and so forth. Just 1 or 2 little subtleties. I won't keep you much longer. The word in English crops up in the following interaction. How did you get here? And I say, on the bus. Or I can say, in the bus. Now let me surprise some of you. The on the bus won't surprise you, but in the bus probably will. The difference between them is that if I happen to own a Volkswagen bus, so this is a private car, then I will say I came here in the bus and not on the bus. Why not on the bus? Because I claim on the bus is referring to a service with a timetable and professional drivers and so on. The in the bus refers to a vehicle, not a service, but a vehicle. So, if there was an accident and a bus was rolled over or something, and a lot of people climbed out of the bus, and then somebody said, "Where's Joe?" Somebody might say, "He's still in the bus." They would not say he's still on the bus. This bus is not a service anymore. This bus is a vehicle, sort of. So we can also say, let's put Aunt Agatha in that chair. So we're sitting here, we're arranging dinner party tonight, and we're deciding where people are going to sit. And these are dining room chairs. They do not have arms. They're not all that comfortable. And so they're the kind of chair which in English you sit on and not in. We have this distinction in English according to the kind of chair you sit on some of them and in others. But when the chair is not being an item of furniture, but it's being a place round the table, like the bus is being a service, then you always sit on it. You can't say, let's put Aunt Agatha in that. Well, you sort of can, but it's not nearly as colloquial as saying on. Okay. There's a distinction with in French. I can do it in 5 minutes. You use a different preposition if you mean I can start doing it 5 minutes from now, or it will take me 5 minutes to do it. Suppose this one I owe to Ivan Sag. I just got back from Texas, or I just got back from Utah. I had forgotten how good beer tastes. Now, if you don't know anything else, if all you have to go on is your prejudices about Texas and Utah, then you will translate these two things differently. Either wie gutes Bier schmeckt, or wie gut Bier schmeckt. Because if you're coming back from Texas, you're coming back from the place which is well known in the United States for being the place where good beer is produced. So that would be, I had forgotten, wie gutes Bier schmeckt, I'd forgotten the taste of good beer. Whereas it is commonly believed that Utah is a dry state and you can't get beer there at all. So there the translation is of, I had forgotten how good it is that beer tastes, any beer. The interesting thing about this, it all works, it's all just the way I said, except that you can get beer in Utah. What does the word composter mean in French? It means how to do the right thing with this machine here, and if you don't know, I don't have time to tell you. It's got lots of words in various different languages, taken from this column here. In English, it doesn't have a word, so you have to be inventive, and you have to say things like stamp it actually may not stamp it, may punch. You can say validate. Or you can say cancel, which means sort of the opposite of validate, but it doesn't matter. They all mean to use this machine in the way it's intended to be used. I could go on producing examples like this for a long time. I will spare you and not go on doing it. The point is clear. The point is that the translator has to provide stuff which is not in the original. It's not in statistics about the original. It is different from one case to another. You get it from what is on the stage, and there is always more on the stage than has been explicitly introduced in what went before. There is always more there. So you get it from somewhere else, from being a human being, from living in the world, from having noticed things. That's where it comes from. Thank you. Well,
thank you, Martin, for the most interesting talk. And now I would like to invite people to ask questions or to have remarks. Yes, please.
So you say that we need this other information for learning about the world and living in it, so we learn this information. Where do blind people get this information? How can they live and process the world? Where they get the meaning if they don't see?
There are a lot of things that you know about that you've never seen. I mean, seeing is not crucial to this at all. I mean, one of the things we know about blind people is that they know an awful lot about the world. They can find their way around, or can be taught to. They read books, they understand what's going on, they know what car is, they know what love is, they know what it is to eat something sweet and something sour, they know lots and lots and lots of things. And indeed, they have maps of the world in their head that enable them to get around. Seeing is just one extra little thing that they happen not to have. Not all that important.
Basically, all they get is through their ears. Mm-hmm. For example, that could be equivalent to having this large corpora of text. So if you get the right corpora, you might learn the same stuff as the blind people can learn, isn't it?
I don't see how. I mean, you've got to tell me not that somebody who is blind might find these examples difficult. Easy. The examples I've been showing to you would not be any easier if you had some other imaginable sense. And they come from the fact, not that the person knows a little bit more or a little bit less. The point is, you're translating something that you don't, the only knowledge you have about it comes from this text, not from somewhere else. Now, it isn't the case, surely, that you'd say, well, I'm turning your argument around. There could be somebody with some seventh sense that would somehow know all this, would have access to all this. Can't imagine what that would be like. But there's nothing special about sight as far as this is concerned. I mean, I could have taken examples from taste quite easily.
Do you know of any machine translation work which does take advantage of this stage that you talked about? Instead of doing statistical machine translation, it somehow models what is taking place and then does the kind of translation that the high quality translation that people do with the help of this mental stage.
If I knew, about some high-quality machine translation that was able to do all this stuff, I probably wouldn't be here now. No, but I do. There was a time in the 70s, for example, when it was very popular to work on this kind of thing. There were AI-based systems where people said, oh, we need to have a model of the world. Well, let's build one. So there were a lot of work going into building a model of the world, and there were lots of things, lots of problems with that. Probably the easiest way to sum up the problems is that it seems as though what we know about the world is so complex and so interwoven that we can't get the effect we need by telling the machine what the world is like. we have to let the machine find out what the world is like. In other words, it's going to be machine learning again, but it's not going to be learning from the texts. It's going to be learning from wandering around and running into things and, being out there in the world and discovering what it's like. And it's going to take a long time and be hard to do. But people are working on it. I mean, my guess is that, one has to think twice about saying this because it sounds a little bit far out, but one of the most important kinds of input that we need for practical linguistic work will, I think, come from robotics.
Thanks for the great talk and also for being supportive for robotics. Because I share the view. I also think that, and to answer the question of yours, I also think that there's no way the machine could learn to understand language without actually living in the same world as we do. So what you don't have in the corpus is the interaction. You cannot, well, you can query the corpus again, but it's not the same situation anymore. You find a similar sentence somewhere else, and you cannot tell whether this was the same situation. So I think that's the main difference. But I had a question, and maybe to start with, a simple one was you had this nice sentence in French, and the English translation, where do you want me to sit or whatever, and then you needed the extra information, or you could translate it just where do you want me, without any of the detail. So why can't a phrase-based system just remember the whole sentence and so extend the phrases not to just a few words, but to the whole sentence, or even to the whole sequence of sentences? I know this is crazy, so tell me where this would fail.
Because you'll need a lot of them.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And so that was it. And another. Sorry, I have too many ideas around that because the talk was inspiring. So you were also somewhat dismissive to machine learning, and to me, I understood it as like when doing machine learning and doing just the statistics and not like it would be like giving your brain weight to the computer. You were like dismissing. You had one slide where you said that statisticians feel or think that the main mistake of linguists was that they tried to understand the language. So I've spoken to a phonetic statistician, if I want a label, and he said that it just depends what the word to understand means. So what is the meaning of the word to understand? And for him, to understand is actually the capacity to build the models that pass the Turing test. So to him, the understanding is is the ability to build a statistical model.
We can often do things without, in an important sense, understanding them. In fact, we do it all the time. If you watch a child learning to ride a bicycle, there are certain interesting things about that. There are two ways of helping a child ride a bicycle. One is to tell them a lot of things about how to do it and to walk along and hold the bicycle and so on. The other thing is to give the kid the bicycle and go away. Both techniques work about equally well. And the reason why telling the child how the bicycle works, how to ride the bicycle, is a bad idea is because most people who ride bicycles really well do not understand, and in fact what they think they understand is wrong. So often, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an understanding that could be had and in many cases should be had. And my argument was not that would be impossible to do something like translation without understanding the details, but that in the particular case of translation, the examples that I tried to use were supposed to show cases where you have to know. The question of knowing something. Do you know the following thing about writing a bicycle? Good, thank you for giving me.
If I may.
Oh, go ahead.
Back to understanding things and the job of linguists. So why does the particular language require some information? How come that French or Czech has gender on pronouns and English does not? This is a question for bright linguists.
You did it. You got me. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's very, so things like genders and so on are really very strange. I mean, I have no idea. Yeah.
So, I think Martin and then
First, I will just answer Andrzej's first question, why this cannot be possible with phrase-based system, because you learn from professional translators, and usually, I guess, they either use stand or sit, depending on the situation. So you can learn that both are possible, but you never see the sentence which preserves the ambiguities. So this could be the reason you cannot see it in the training data. And my question or notice is that I think that I agree that your examples are quite tricky for the current machine translation, but some of those can be translated using, or the information needed is contained in the language model. And for the coreference task, we try to solve it for machine translation, and we use machine learning for this to resolve the coreference, some cliff of mine. So just maybe we should distinguish some of those sentences are still unable for us to translate them, even with machine learning and all the parallel corpora, and we need some more abstract understanding of the word. But for some, let's say, the examples with schools, different kind of schools, you get it from the language model. Not all of those sentences, but let's say 90% of the test corpora can be translated correctly just based on this. Well,
the point of that particular slide is I think that I could continue that list for a long time, introducing new, slightly different ways that the word school is being used. And the thing that is going to tip you off as to what the intended meaning is in this particular case does not have to come within 5 words of the word school. You know, it can be a long way away. It can be built up. It has to be anywhere on the stage, and it can have been on the stage for a long time. It doesn't have to have been just put there. So, no. And look, I think lots of people will say, yes, I know language models don't have to be about n-grams. They could be about all sorts of different things. At the moment, they tend to be about n-grams. They could be about other things. What's wrong here is, I think, more profound than that. This is not a property of the language at all. It's a property of this particular use that's going on now. This has never, ever happened before. And things that have never happened before happen all the time.
Remarks, just first of all, just correcting the issue that English does not distinguish gender and pronouns. English does distinguish gender and pronouns. And then I would like to be to point out. Actually, I would like to be even more pessimistic. Because I think that robotics will not provide that much help as we might think, because if you take the example of deaf and dumb people, or I think deaf is enough, then these people are actually, because they never hear the language, they are unable to produce proper natural language if you don't take sign language. as their natural language. The story is that these people are truly, well, in contrast to blind people who can speak, well, they cannot really read, but they can speak and listen to language and understand everything, then deaf and dumb people really do have extreme, well, I mean, people who are born deaf and dumb, not those people who by accident at the age of 20 or I don't know, when they are deaf before the period when they learn language. So they live in the world with us. They have even all the experience which a machine or a robot can have. But nevertheless, they are unable to use language properly. So this is the reason for which I would like to be, I am more, I don't know whether I would like, but I am even more pessimistic.
We were them out.
So, may I have a question, which is not that much based on what you are saying today, but related to what you said, I don't know how many years ago, when you wrote evaluation or report or review of the verbmobile proposal. And there, in that thick report, you proposed, or maybe not just proposed, but you were thinking about a possibility to have a negotiation module or negotiation something which would help machine translation to exist, or I mean to come out. So is that something you still think would help, or is that something which you don't see? I don't speak about the possibility of realization of such a module, but just the idea of this negotiation module.
Well, this is connected with an idea that I believe in very strongly, and that is that if the world is going to get all the high-quality translations that it wants, just having traditional translators around isn't going to be enough. We do need to provide them with some help. And oddly enough, the only suggestion out of many possible ones is that we should do machine translations. There are lots of other things that you could do. And what I had in mind in that report, and which I still think is something that people should be working on hard, is models of translation that involve humans and machines. And the most obvious of these are providing help to translators, and there's a lot of that being done. There's a lot of very ingenious work being done on finding previous translations that are similar to this one, and so forth. A lot of interesting work. These are situations where the translator is in the driver's seat. The translator, the human person, is doing the translation, and they have some mechanical aids. What I had in mind in that particular case was something where the initiative is where the machine is doing the translation and can call upon help from human beings. And I had in mind simply things like, when you say this, when you say ta cuisine, are you referring to this person or that person? Or when you say this, do you mean that or that or something? I mean, things where the machine could often be in a position of knowing that there is some information that it needs, but not knowing what that is. And quite often, you can imagine a question that it could ask if only it knew how to ask it, that would clarify that. That idea went to sleep for many years. I actually have a student who's working on it now.
Well, there are no questions, so I would like to repeat and to say what I think we all feel, that we are very happy that you spend time with us, that we have listened to a very interesting talk, and that it might get some response in the heads of our young specialists working on machine translation. I don't put there any adjective in front of the machine translation. Anyway, thank you very much once more. Thank you for coming, and hope to see you next time, next week. The next Jelinek guest is Martha Palmer, but that will be in 3 weeks from now. 5 weeks. Okay, you have it on the website. Anyway, so thank you very much. Thank you, and looking forward to seeing you next time.